The bridge groaned, then cracked, and in that exact, impossible moment, time didn't just slow, it waited. Karen screamed, arms flailing as she stumbled backward in designer heels, her HOA badge catching the light like a sheriff's star before vanishing beneath her tailored blazer. The ribbon had been cut only seconds ago. The applause was still echoing, but the brand new footbridge, her monument to control and community progress, sank into the muddy creek below like a fallen log. You could hear the panic before you could see it. Freeze frame. That's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up here, sitting in a folding lawn chair with coffee in hand, watching a six-figure vanity project implode in slow motion. Better question, where were you watching from? From the crowd, from the sidelines, from the HOA group chat already buzzing with memes, or were you up on the ridge with me, far enough to stay clean, but close enough to smell the concrete failing? Because to understand how we got to this exact moment where gravity, ego, and karma collided in one perfect splash, you need to start at the beginning. And no, the beginning wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't even when they poured the first bucket of concrete. It was a Thursday, 6 weeks after I bought the land. I remember it because I just picked up a new set of cedar fence posts and was unloading them from my truck. Sweat on my back, the kind of sweat that feels earned. My land stretched 3 acres wide, rural, wild, stubbornly untamed, just outside city limits, but close enough that I didn't need a map to find groceries. I'd left the suburbs for a reason. Left behind cul-de-sacs, bake sales, and the polite tyranny of HOA bylaws that told me what shade of beige my shutters had to be. I thought I'd outrun all that. I thought 3 acres and a moss-covered creek would be my fortress of solitude. I was wrong. She walked across the property line like she owned the air. Blonde, crisp-collared, sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara she hadn't earned but demanded to wear anyway. She waved like we were old friends, marched up to the truck like I'd invited her, and said, "Hi there. You must be the new owner of Parcel 14B. I didn't answer. She didn't notice. I'm Karen Reynolds. She beamed, offering her hand like a realtor closing a deal that hadn't been made. I'm the HOA president for Willow Ridge Meadows, just on the other side of the creek. I shook her hand because I didn't yet know better. She smelled like lavender and litigation. We're really excited about the bridge project, she said with the confidence of someone who thinks consent is just a technicality. This little waterway will be such a charming crossing point for our community pass system, connects the east and west cul-de-sacs beautifully. You'll see markers up by the end of the week. Shouldn't be disruptive, but I wanted to extend the courtesy of letting you know." She smiled. I blinked. What bridge? Her smile flickered, like I'd missed a punchline at a party I hadn't been invited to. "Oh," she said. "It was in the newsletter. The board approved it last month. It'll span right over the creek. A footbridge, of course, nothing invasive. Improves community access, raises property values. Very standard." That's when I dropped the post hole digger. It hit the dirt with a thunk. "Karen," I said slowly, "that creek is on my land, every inch of it." Her smile dipped just slightly, then reassembled like a bad Botox job. "Oh," she said, "I think there's some confusion. Our legal maps show a public access easement running adjacent to the stream. Adjacent isn't across." I snapped. "And that easement is for utility maintenance. It doesn't give you the right to parade joggers across my damn backyard." She adjusted her sunglasses. "Well," she said, "I'm sure it'll all get sorted out." And with that, she turned and walked away. No apology, no concern, no acknowledgement that what she'd just done was declare eminent domain on private land, like she was annexing territory for a pastel-colored HOA empire. That night, I tore through every document I had: deed, title, survey, the original 1973 plat map, faded but crystal clear. No easement, no access, nothing but bold black lines saying this creek, and 15 feet on either side, belongs to you. The next morning, orange flags went up anyway. Bright little plastic markers stuck in the earth like claims for a queen. Surveyors showed up with clipboards and spray paint, walking my property like it was theirs. One stepped within 10 feet of my porch. "You're trespassing." I called out. He waved like I'd offered lemonade, kept snapping pictures. That was the day I started documenting everything. I pulled out my phone, flipped it to video, and whispered, "Day one." Because I knew deep in my gut that this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding cleared up with a phone call. This was a war. It just hadn't declared itself yet. Within a week, a trailer rolled up loaded with rebar, concrete bags, and a generator. Workers didn't knock. They didn't ask. They just walked onto my property like it was a shared driveway. I stopped the foreman, asked who sent them. He muttered something about orders from the board and handed me a blueprint with my creek sliced through the middle like a paper surgery. The date in the corner approved 2 weeks before I even signed the purchase papers. My jaw locked. Karen had planned this before I even moved in. They didn't think I'd fight. They thought I'd fold. They thought I'd get tired, overwhelmed, maybe move again. What they didn't know was that I come from a long line of stubborn bastards, and I had something they didn't time, and a creek, and righteous fury. That day, I renamed the folder on my desktop Exhibit A. I filmed every truck, every pour, every post. I wasn't just watching them build a bridge. I was building a case, and they didn't even notice. Karen stopped waving, started sending community updates filled with passive-aggressive praise for residents who support our shared vision. When I emailed a cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer friend in Missouri, she replied, "Your claims lack merit. Construction continues." Just that, cold, dismissive. So I stopped emailing. I stopped talking. I started preparing because I wasn't going to stop them from building the bridge. No, I was going to let them. I was going to let them pour every illegal ounce of concrete into my land. And then I was going to tear their kingdom down from the bottom up with their own blueprints. Because sometimes the only way to show someone they're standing on borrowed ground is to let the earth move beneath them. And I knew the rain was coming. The first sign that the war had gone cold wasn't the construction noise or even the sight of strangers on my land. It was the silence. A heavy, suburban kind of silence. Weaponized and purposeful. Like a neighborhood-wide decision to unsee me. The old couple who used to wave when walking their Shih Tzu now passed my gate without a glance. The teenager who once asked to fish in my creek avoided eye contact. Headphones in, head down, even the mailman once chatty. A fan of my homemade jerky now stuffed envelopes through the slot with the mechanical precision of someone trying not to engage with the ghost behind the door. It was Karen's silence, echoed through every well-manicured hedge and freshly mulched flower bed. It was the silence of a community pretending I didn't exist. Like I'd become the villain in a story they hadn't read from the beginning. And then came the letters, not official mail, handwritten, anonymous, dropped into my mailbox like threats wrapped in stationery. The first was on lined notebook paper, a single sentence written in thick black Sharpie. "Why do you hate progress?" The second was folded neatly inside a grocery store coupon flyer. "One person shouldn't hold back an entire community. Selfish." The third ditched handwriting altogether. Magazine clippings glued into a ransom note collage that read, "We will build it with or without you." I laid them out on the kitchen table like evidence, stuck Post-it notes on each, labeled them Phase 1 psychological operations, because that's what it was. Karen wasn't just trying to build a bridge. She was trying to build a narrative. And in that narrative, I was the obstructionist, the man on the hill, the weirdo who didn't understand community. Her latest HOA bulletin didn't name me directly, but it didn't need to. The headline, "Healing a Divided Neighborhood," featured a large graphic of the bridge, complete with a dotted line ending just short of my property. Underneath it read, "Current barriers to completion, subtle as a brick through a windshield." And then, as if on cue, the violations began. Bright orange paper notices appeared on my fence gate, flapping in the wind like surrender flags I hadn't raised. One cited non-compliance with community landscaping standards for grass, allegedly, despite the fact I'd mowed it less than 24 hours earlier. Another called out my wooden fence as structurally compromised and a potential hazard, even though it had passed county inspection 2 months prior. A third claimed evidence of standing water creating mosquito risk, referring to a shallow puddle no bigger than a shoebox caused by a leaky hose nozzle I'd already replaced. I scanned every notice, dated them, filed them, started a new folder, HOA violation, harassment. But even then, I didn't retaliate. Not directly, not yet. I shifted focus. I upgraded my surveillance. 2 new trail cameras, one mounted beneath the eaves of the barn with a panoramic lens, the other camouflaged among the tree line across the creek, where the construction crew had taken to stashing materials. I synced them to motion detection, 24/7, and waited. The footage began rolling in faster than I could catalog it. First, I caught 2 men offloading concrete on my side of the creek, no permits, no posted notices, just work boots, steel rebar, and the gall of assumed authority. They dug into my bank like it was city land, poured quickset like they were doing me a favor. I clipped the footage, time-stamped it. 3 days later, I watched as they began trenching, not erosion ditches, not runoff control, actual trench work 3 feet deep, stretching across the southern slope and aimed directly toward the new footbridge foundation. It took me a full day to confirm what they'd done. They'd installed a hidden pipe, running beneath the foundation, redirecting the creek's natural bend westward toward my land. They'd rechanneled water on private property without filing a single hydrology report. And that, finally, was enough to call in the cavalry. I contacted the county's environmental office, got routed to someone named Erica Ladd, field agent, watershed compliance, attitude like sandpaper and zero patience for shortcuts. She showed up in a tan county-issued truck, clipboard in hand, boots already dirty. She walked the edge of the creek without small talk. 15 minutes in, she looked up from her notes and said flatly, "They filed nothing, no displacement forms, no watershed permits. This is a Class C violation at minimum." She tapped her pen on the form. "Could become criminal if erosion leads to public risk." I nodded. "They've already changed the flow by 4 feet. I measured it." Erica raised an eyebrow. "You keep records. I keep everything." I said, "And I did." I gave her photos, coordinates, footage. She filed her report. I followed with my own cease and desist letter, this time not from a friend, but drafted with input from 3 different compliance officers. I CC'd the zoning board, the county clerk, and the environmental division. I even had it hand-delivered to the HOA office, where a college intern signed for it like she was holding a live grenade. Karen's response wasn't legal. It was theatrical. She added a new agenda item to the next HOA meeting, addressing misinformation and obstruction tactics regarding community bridge project. Translation: I was now officially a problem. And the board, they didn't slow down. They accelerated. More trucks, more gravel, more silent workers showing up at dawn and leaving before sunset. No posted permits, no safety inspections. They were building like the devil was on their heels. And I realized why. They weren't hoping to finish. They were racing to. The strategy was clear. Build fast, argue later, bury any legal consequences under the weight of a completed structure. Developers use the same playbook all the time. Karen was betting that the beast of demolishing a finished bridge would be too high financially. Politically, she wasn't just crossing a creek. She was trying to cross a finish line before the law caught up. So I changed strategies. I stopped playing defense. I planted survey flags bright orange, marked with GPS coordinates and parcel numbers. I posted signs, private property, unauthorized construction in violation of County Code 16-7C, trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted. I filed daily incident logs with the Sheriff's Department, not because they'd do anything they wouldn't, but because paper trails have power. I contacted the local paper under anonymity, gave them a quote: resident alleges HOA ignored environmental regulations in bridge construction. They printed it, and that, finally, cracked the armor. The new guy, Steve, moved into a house on the far cul-de-sac, corner lot, young family, golden retriever, brand new mulch. One morning, he knocked on my door, hat in hand like a man apologizing for someone else's mess. "Hey," he said, Is it true they never got permission for the bridge? I didn't answer, just handed him a printed copy of the site plan, the plat map, and my cease and desist letter. He read it, lips moving slightly as he pieced it together. Jesus, he whispered, they really did this. They did, I said, and they're not done. Within days, the shift was palpable. Karen's smear campaign didn't land the same. Neighbors stopped, avoiding eye contact. A few even nodded. One offered to help me mow. Rumors began bouncing back toward her instead of away. The silence broke, not loudly, just enough. Karen had overplayed her hand, and me, I was still filming, still logging, because I didn't want to stop the bridge. I wanted it finished. And then I wanted it to collapse under its own arrogance, on the exact land they never had the right to touch. Because nothing teaches a lesson like watching your lies sink into the mud. And I knew the storm was coming. It wasn't sabotage. That's the part people struggle to understand. They hear collapse, bridge, lawsuit, and assume something dramatic, a chainsaw in the dead of night, dynamite under the planks, a masked vigilante with a grudge and a grudge-fueled wrench. But no, that's not how real things fall apart. That's not how systems crack. That's not how you bring down an empire built on signatures and smugness. You don't need fire when you have gravity. You don't need explosives when nature is patient and the structure is flawed. All you need is one missing piece, and time, and rain. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before the crash came the final push, the last, desperate sprint to legitimacy. Karen had turned quiet panic into performative optimism. The HOA newsletters got brighter, thicker, full of pastel infographics and community buzzwords. Unity through progress, connectivity for future generations, celebrate our bridge, a symbol of what we can accomplish together. She posted a video to the neighborhood Facebook group, standing in front of the nearly completed structure, voice trembling beneath forced enthusiasm. We're proud to say we're ahead of schedule and under budget, she declared, as if those two things weren't red flags in any construction project involving concrete, steel, and amateur governance. Meanwhile, my inbox pinged with another violation. This one for unauthorized signage facing a public access trail, a trail that didn't exist and never had. I scanned it, timestamped it, added it to the stack. The real activity was happening on the southern bank. I hadn't been down there in a few days, not since the rechanneling trench had started to dry out and expose the underside of the bridge's main support pad. So I went, dressed for legitimacy, steel-toed boots, reflective vest I found in the back of my barn, clipboard with a red sticker that said, Site Observation, Property Owner. I walked slow, measured spans, counted bolts. The crew, mostly subcontracted labor, ignored me. One guy offered me water. I nodded. Nice kid. Had no idea the HOA was feeding him to the wolves. What I saw that day, I'll never forget. Formwork that looked like it had been reused from a school play. Expansion joints misaligned. Rebar exposed in places it had no business being exposed. But the worst part, the golden goose, the ticking clock. The flaw that would become a felony was beneath the southern footing. They had driven a brace into a slope that was no longer stable. The steel anchor plate wasn't rated for exterior erosion zones, and it had been installed in soil that had already started to collapse thanks to the trench they dug and the pipe they buried. You didn't need a degree in engineering to see what was coming. The pipe was sagging. The soil was separating. The footing was losing its marriage to the earth. It wasn't going to hold. Not forever. Maybe not even for a week. I took photos, logged coordinates, documented every inch like a forensic tech at a crime scene. That night, I filed a formal inspection letter to the HOA's construction liaison, stating that as the owner of the land beneath the southern support, I had observed evidence of substandard load-bearing installations and possible future compromise due to accelerated erosion. I CC'd the county environmental inspector, the HOA's generic inbox, and 3 members of the board just in case someone still had a conscience hiding behind their laminated badges. The reply came 2 days later in the form of a dry, unsigned legal letter on HOA letterhead. Your concerns have been noted. Independent engineers retained by the Willow Ridge Meadows HOA have confirmed the structural integrity of the bridge's design. Further interference with construction will be considered obstruction. Obstruction. That word hung in the air like a challenge. Cute. But still, I waited. I didn't retaliate. I didn't scream. I just drove back to the site one evening. After the workers had gone. Gloves on. Heart calm. The wedge was easy to find. A chunk of softwood pine, not even pressure-treated, jammed beneath a temporary column brace that was supposed to be removed once the final grout pour cured. But the grout never came. They skipped it, and someone, probably in a rush to appease Karen's timeline, shoved the wood in as a stopgap. I reached down, fingers in the cold dirt, and pulled. The wedge came loose with a sigh. No hammer, no damage, just subtraction. I pocketed the splintered scrap like a keepsake and walked away. After that, I didn't visit the bridge. I didn't need to. I had already checked the weather. 6 straight days of spring rain were coming. Slow, soaking, constant, not enough to flood, just enough to seep, just enough to saturate the bank, weigh the slope, whisper to the soil, tell it to let go. I made coffee every morning and watched the radar like a man counting down to something inevitable. Day 3. I started getting text messages from neighbors I hadn't heard from in months. Hey, you seen the creek? Looks high, should we be worried? Karen says the new drainage system is working fine, but I'm not so sure. Day 5. Someone posted a photo to the neighborhood group, The Southern Slope, visibly slumped, with a caption that read bridge fatigue, or just my imagination. Day 6. I packed a lawn chair and a thermos and hiked up to the ridge. The postcard arrived that same morning, glossy, full color, embossed letters, ribbon cutting ceremony, Willow Ridge Community Footbridge, join us for cupcakes, speeches, and community pride. Karen really thought this was it, the end of the conflict. The coronation, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of the reckoning. I arrived early. No one noticed me. I set up just far enough to be unseen, but close enough to see everything. The drone buzzed above. The crowd gathered, kids in rain boots, old ladies with umbrellas, HOA board members in color-coordinated jackets, and Karen, of course, blue blazer, HOA pin, clipboard like a badge of honor. She stood at the bridge entrance, flanked by Greg and Susan and Fred, her 3 most loyal pawns. Greg handed her a giant pair of scissors. She lifted them with theatrical flair. Today, we cross into the future together. She said, click, the ribbon fell. Applause rose. The board members stepped onto the bridge. 1, 2, 3, 4. I saw it. The dip, subtle, but real. The southern footing dropped half an inch. Imperceptible to most, but not to me. I heard the sound a second later. A soft crack, then a deeper groan. Concrete under stress, soil surrendering. Then it happened. The south end of the bridge dropped by nearly a foot, jerking the deck like a seesaw. Karen wobbled. Greg stumbled backward. Susan screamed. One planter box flew into the creek like a torpedo. Chaos erupted. People screamed. Phones went up. The drone caught every second. I didn't move. I just took a sip of coffee, and then, slowly, I smiled. The man at the door wore khakis too tight for his frame and a nervous smile that belonged to someone who wished he were delivering pizza instead. He handed me a manila envelope with the stiffness of someone passing a cursed object and said the words I'd been waiting for since the first survey stake hit my land. You've been served. I didn't flinch, just thanked him, stepped inside, and laid the envelope on the kitchen table like a sacred artifact. I opened it slowly, savoring the weight of every stapled accusation. Karen Reynolds, in all her mud-streaked glory, was suing me for intentional sabotage, malicious negligence, obstruction of community development, and my personal favorite, aggravated resistance to progress. Her lawyer's name was embossed in faux gold font on top of the complaint, as if gaudiness might replace legal merit. The language inside read like a political thriller penned by a caffeine-drunk intern. The defendant did willfully and knowingly undermine the integrity of the Willow Ridge Community Footbridge by removing vital structural elements. Despite repeated denials of involvement, there were photos, some blurry screenshots of the collapsed bridge, one of Karen mid-kneel with a face like a drowning possum, and a printed post from the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had commented, "Well, that aged like milk." Under Karen's ribbon-cutting photo, they'd submitted that as evidence. I laughed. Then I poured myself a whiskey and pulled out my own binder, thicker, heavier, built over months like a slow-burning bomb. My countersuit wasn't reaction. It was preparation finally unleashed. Trespass, unlawful construction, environmental violation, defamation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and for spice abuse of community funds. I had it all. 24 time-stamped videos, 6 drone captures, 5 certified land surveys, including the original 1973 plat map and a GPS overlay from last spring. 2 independent engineering assessments from licensed professionals who had both concluded that the southern footing had failed due to inadequate subgrade preparation and unpermitted soil displacement. But none of that compared to the crown jewel, an anonymous envelope I'd received 2 weeks prior, slid beneath my fence gate in the dead of night. Inside were printed emails, screenshots of internal HOA communications, some redacted, some not, no signature, but one name kept recurring, Karen. In one email, she wrote, "If we fast-track the build, he won't have a legal leg to stand on. It'll be done before anyone blinks." In another, "The contractor is my cousin's firm. He'll keep things quiet if we keep the checks moving." And the PS to resistance, "If the bridge collapses, we'll blame weather. Deny everything." That sentence alone earned its own folder in my cabinet, Exhibit K. I filed the countersuit within 48 hours. Karen responded like she always did with a Facebook post. "Some people don't understand community values," she typed. "But one selfish neighbor won't stop our vision for connectivity." The likes came slower this time. The comments, sharper. "You mean the bridge you built on private land," one said. "I thought unity didn't require trespassing," said another. The tide had turned and she knew it. The HOA quietly raised dues to cover legal contingencies. And suddenly, even her loyalists began to blink. The next board meeting was a ghost town. Greg didn't show. Susan resigned in a group message citing moral uncertainty. Fred stopped wearing his badge. Meanwhile, I was prepping for court like a general with nothing but time and resentment. My lawyer, Dana Fields, was a former federal prosecutor with a voice like a guillotine, and the patience of a woman who enjoyed making grown men sweat. She reviewed my file in silence, flipped through each page, then looked at me and said, "You're going to win, but we're not going to settle. We're going to bury them." The court date arrived on a humid Monday morning. I wore a dark suit. Karen wore desperation masked in navy blue polyester. Her lawyer adjusted his tie every 90 seconds like it was trying to choke him. The judge, an older man with no patience for HOA theatrics, leaned forward the moment opening statements ended and said, "Show me the footage." We did. 6 camera angles, drone shots, close-ups of survey flags, a video showing concrete being poured directly onto land, clearly marked with my parcel number. Dana narrated calmly, "This is the defendant's property. Here is the 1973 plat map. Here is the county's GPS overlay." The HOA ignored this. Built anyway. And falsified easement datum in the submission to zoning, Karen's lawyer objected, citing presumed good faith actions and community imperative. Dana responded without blinking. Presumed doesn't override property law, and community imperative doesn't excuse forgery. Then came the emails. We projected them on the screen one by one, Karen's words filling the courtroom like smoke. "Once it's done, he can't touch us. He won't sue. He's too isolated. No permits necessary. It's just a creek." The judge took off his glasses. "Did the board knowingly build a structure on private land without permission or permits?" Dana replied, "Yes, Your Honor," and then retaliated when the landowner refused to comply. The judge turned to Karen. "Do you deny authoring these statements?" She opened her mouth. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Too late. The damage was done. Next came the financials. Invoices from a company called Pinespan Development, a newly formed LLC with no online presence. Registered to a mailbox at a strip mall 2 towns over. Total disbursements 237,000 in HOA funds, no bidding process, no oversight, no liability insurance. Dana delivered the final blow with a document from the county's Environmental Compliance Office. A report signed by Erica Ladd confirming 4 distinct violations: unauthorized soil displacement, illegal waterway alteration, construction without hydrological review, and failure to notify adjacent landowners. The room went silent. The judge leaned back, took a breath, and said, "I find in favor of the defendant full damages, all legal fees, injunction on further construction." Then he paused, as if debating whether to say the next thing. "And I'm referring this case to the district attorney for further investigation into potential misuse of public funds." Karen didn't move. Her face was blank, but her knuckles were white on the armrest. Her kingdom had cracked not from my resistance, but from her arrogance. The ruling triggered a chain reaction. Within 2 weeks, the HOA board resigned en masse. The newsletter went dark. The bridge was sealed with caution tape, then dismantled by order of the county. Residents demanded transparency. Some asked for refunds. A few showed up at my gate with pie. Karen sold her house within the month. I saw the listing online. Charming home in quiet community. Great for walks. No mention of the bridge. No mention of me. I cashed the settlement check a week later, enough to fix the creek bank, plant new trees, and take a long overdue trip to Alaska. But before I left, I did one more thing. Right where the bridge footing used to be, just past the oak tree line, I sank 2 cedar posts deep into the earth. Between them, I hung a sign I carved myself. The letters burned in dark and bold: private property, structural integrity, guaranteed. Every now and then, I catch a glimpse of the old board members driving by, heads down, badges gone, dreams of HOA glory evaporated in the heat of real consequences. And when I see them, I raise my coffee, tip my hat, and smile, because peace isn't given. It's protected, inch by stubborn inch. The creek sounds different now. Not louder, not quieter, just different. It hums like it knows something, like it remembers. Some mornings, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and just listen to it flow smooth over stones, rippling where the footing used to be, whispering over the scars like a storyteller retelling an old war. And in those moments, I don't feel triumphant. I feel still. The kind of stillness you only earn by refusing to move when someone tells you to. The kind that comes not from victory, but from knowing you never surrendered. After the lawsuit unraveled the HOA, the land got quieter, but not in the weaponized way it had before. This time it was a healing quiet, the kind that comes after a long fever breaks. The HOA office windows stayed dark for months. The bulletin board on the east cul-de-sac still had a yellowed flyer stapled to it from before the collapsed Willow Ridge Bridge opening ceremony. A new era begins. No one had the energy to tear it down. Karen was gone, sold the house to a retired couple from Phoenix who didn't know the history and didn't ask. I saw her once after it all ended. She was loading boxes into a moving van in sweatpants and sunglasses, trying to disappear. She saw me watching from the ridge, froze, then turned and shut the van door like she could seal off everything she didn't want to face. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. Not just to her reputation, but to the mythology she'd built around her role in the neighborhood, the queen bee of suburban order, the gatekeeper of community values. The problem with building your kingdom on control is that it crumbles the moment someone says no. And I had said no, louder than she ever expected. The county's audit came next. A slow, methodical unspooling of everything the board had ever touched. Missing funds, unregistered contracts, multiple projects that never made it to permit stage. Karen's cousin, the one who ran Pine Span Development, skipped town before the interviews began. His office was a UPS mailbox with a paper nameplate that had peeled off in the rain. They never found him, but they didn't need to. The paper trail was enough. The county revoked Willow Ridge's self-managed HOA status and placed it under provisional oversight. For the first time in decades, the neighborhood didn't police itself. It had to answer to someone, and that, more than any bridge or lawsuit, was what finally broke the spell. People began talking again, not just nodding at the mailbox, but stopping, asking, remembering how to speak without fear. A woman named Claire, who used to avoid eye contact, brought over a basket of tomatoes from her garden one morning and said, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. We all knew something was wrong. We just didn't know what to do." I told her the truth. "You didn't have to do anything. You just had to see it." She nodded, eyes wet, and walked away lighter. And it wasn't just her. People started showing up at the edge of the creek. Kids played again. A boy built a stick dam where the bridge had once shadowed the water. A jogger slowed down and read the sign I'd carved: private property, structural integrity guaranteed, and gave a thumbs up without irony. The land had healed before the people did. That always happens first. Nature is efficient that way. The grass grew back over the torn-up paths. Wildflowers returned where the concrete had once dried. A heron nested again near the bend where they'd tried to divert the flow. It stood one morning, still and regal, watching the water like it was reading the memory of every footstep that shouldn't have been there. I stayed busy, replanted trees along the southern ridge, repaired the old split-rail fence not because of any notice, but because I wanted to. Put in a bench by the oak line where I could sit and see both banks. No structures, no bridges, just distance and air and space to breathe. One afternoon, Eric, the guy who used to attend meetings in my name, came by with a six-pack and a question. "You ever regret not stopping them sooner?" I thought about that. The mess, the tension, the rain-soaked wreckage. And I said, no, because if I had stopped them, they would have said I was just being difficult. Now they know I was right. He nodded. We drank 2 beers in silence. Let the wind do the talking. The final check from the county arrived in April. It covered environmental remediation, legal reimbursements, and a formal apology attached like a sticky note to a bank transfer. I didn't cash it right away, just kept it on the fridge. A reminder that justice, like erosion, takes time but always finds the weakest point. I used the money to expand the garden, built a shed, not a big one, just enough for tools and peace. That summer, I took my first real vacation in years. Alaska, cool air, real mountains, land no HOA had ever touched. I hiked until my legs ached and my lungs remembered how to breathe like they belonged to something wild. When I came back, the land welcomed me without ceremony. Just the steady hush of the creek and the soft breath of wind through oaks. That's the thing about owning something, truly owning it. Not just on paper, but in spirit. You feel when it exhales. You know when it's safe again. And this land, finally, was safe. Not because of a fence, not because of a lawsuit, but because the people who thought they could rewrite its boundaries had been shown unequivocally that some lines aren't negotiable, that no amount of pastel brochures or neighborhood slogans can erase the truth carved into soil and deed. And sometimes, the quiet man on the ridge isn't a villain. He's a warning, a boundary, a living, breathing no. I never wanted to be a hero. I still don't. All I ever wanted was peace. And now, every morning, I get it. Not because it was handed to me, but because I held my ground, because I refused to let my story be told by someone else's script. And now that the bridge is gone and the lies have sunk beneath the mud, there's only one thing left to do. I raise my coffee, I look out at what's mine, and I listen, not for footsteps, not for concrete mixers, just for the creek. It knows. It always did.